Good evening. It is time for the Iman Report. It is Sunday, November 1st. We are recapping NFL Week 8. We always start off with the game that was on Sunday Night Football, the game between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys. Probably one of the more toilet games on Sunday Night Football of the year, as Philadelphia beats Dallas 23-9. Dallas, all their scoring came from Greg Zuerlein. 3 for 4, with over all three of those field goals coming from over 40 yards, with one missed field goal from 52. Ben DiNucci, well, sounds more like an Italian restaurant than a quarterback. DiNucci, 21 for 40, sacked 4 times. But honestly, despite Philadelphia winning it now 3-4-1, Carson Wentz stunk it up tonight. Carson Wentz stunk it up for most of the game, sacked 4 times, threw 2 picks, threw for 2 touchdowns, 123 passing yards. Not exactly a game that inspires confidence if you are a Philly fan. But Philly is 3-4. 3-4 is good enough. 3-4-1, excuse me. 3-4-1 is going to get you is likely going to get you into the dance in the NFC East with that record. Dallas, it's just a matter of time till we say adios to Mike McCarthy. I think at this point it's safe to say Mike McCarthy and Mike Nolan are going to be one and done in Dallas. This season has gone off the rails for Dallas. Dallas is embracing the idea of being a deadline seller. But for Philadelphia, the schedule is not going to be too easy for them after this. They do get an easy game in New York against the G-Men. That'll probably be a win there. They get to 4-4-1. Then they play Cleveland, Seattle, Green Bay, New Orleans, Arizona. They could lose those 5 games, then 4-9-1. Before they play Dallas and Washington, and then be a respectable 6-9-1. Going into the playoffs, not exactly great. But for Dallas, they are who they are going to be. They're going to embrace the deadline seller. They are pretty much playing for a high draft pick at this point. Dallas has mailed it in. They even tried to intentionally spot Philadelphia a safety tonight. But yeah, it's just all for 2021 at this point for Dallas. On to the Thursday night game, Atlanta now 2-6 after they beat Carolina. Carolina falls to 3-5. Teddy Bridgewater got concussed in that game, but he was roughed up 3 times, sacked 3 times. Matt Ryan, okay in this game. Mike Davis had an okay game. But I think for Carolina, we're starting to see a team that is looking more like a team that we thought we were going to see with the Panthers. That's more going to play for a high draft pick than an 8-8 team. Panthers now get Kansas City, Tampa Bay, Detroit. Those 3 teams in a row, I think those will be losses right there. It'll put them at 3-8. 3-9. I think that they'll probably finish the year 6-10. I kind of think that's where, and that's 6-10 is realistically where Carolina was going to be. Then 8-8 and 9-7. But Matt Rhule is still a good coach. Atlanta, they have played better as Raheem Morris has taken over as head coach. We too early to say yet if Raheem Morris will get the interim tag removed. But the Falcons' back stretch is not too terribly bad either. They get, well, they could probably rattle a couple wins. Maybe 4-12. I'll go with that. 4-12. But if Atlanta can start start playing spoiler down the stretch, then you could see Raheem Morris get the interim tag removed in Atlanta. But we shall see as time will tell in that one. Now on to today's games. The Buffalo Bills beat the New England Patriots 24-21. Buffalo did what they did best, do just good enough to win. This is Buffalo's first win against New England under Sean McDermott. Cam Newton had a better game, 15 for 25, 174 passing yards, 2 sacks. Josh Allen didn't have his best game, but he was good enough. Devin Singletary and Zach Moss were able to run the football, which helped them out. Stefon Diggs played much better today. Buffalo now 6-2, and they're winning despite not the greatest performances out of Josh Allen. As for New England, they are now 2-5. This is probably the worst record we've seen under the Bill Belichick era. Damian Harris was able to run for 100 yards. But at 2-5, New England at this point is going to be a seller at the trade deadline. As New England will probably look to pile up some draft capital at the deadline and see where they can end up. Maybe New England can lose enough games this year that I doubt they'll tank for Trevor. But there's other viable quarterbacks in the draft. There's a Zach Wilson. There's Trey Lance. There's Justin Fields. This is a very deep quarterback class coming into the 2021 draft. And who knows if Bill Belichick's going to stick around for 2021 or not. But it's time for the Patriots to start evaluating and drafting a quarterback in 2021. They will probably get a feel-good win against the Jets. They're not the Jets bad at this point. But it's rare to see New England lose 3 in a row under Bill Belichick. New England is going to probably be, like I said, they're likely going to be drafting a quarterback, and it's rebuild time in New England. Probably at some point this year you will see Jarrett Stidham get the start. It's evaluation time in New England, see who's going to come back in 2021. But as for Buffalo, they may not be alone in the AFC East race. On the other half of the bracket, we had the Miami Dolphins play the LA Rams today, and the Miami Dolphins victorious over the LA Rams. Miami now 4-3. And 2-0 against the NFC West. 2-1. Dolphins are now 2-1 against the NFC West. You know, I am going to dub Miami a playoff team as of today. Miami is looking like a team that is going to somehow sneak into the playoffs. LA playing mediocre again. LA 1-2 in their last 3 games. Goff threw it 61 times. That's not a recipe for success. Goff had 2 picks, sacked twice. Darrell Henderson was pretty much shut down. Tua wasn't great, but he was good enough. The Miami defense was good enough to win the game. But let's take a look at the schedules for the Bills and the Dolphins coming up. We'll start with the Bills schedule. Buffalo will be pretty much going up against the NFC West in the next 3 of their 4 games. They get Seattle, Arizona, not exactly locks to win those games. Then they play LA, the LA Chargers. Then they play San Francisco. San Francisco on Monday Night Football. Then they play Pittsburgh, Denver, New England, and Miami. There is a really good chance that the Bills could fade down the stretch. They could. But yeah, I think that probably the Bills, whoever wins the AFC East, will likely win their division at 10-6. The schedule is tough for the Bills. Let's take a look at the Dolphins. Dolphins play the Cardinals next week. It's not an easy game. Then they play the LA Chargers. That's probably a win. They play Denver. That's probably a win. They could win the next 4 games and end up 8-3. Or and even bungle. So yeah, the schedule might favor the Dolphins to win the East, surprisingly. Dolphins' schedule is not too terribly bad for the final 8 games of the year. They get the Cardinals, they get the Chargers, the Broncos, the Jets, the Bengals, the Chiefs, the Patriots, and the Patriots is looking like more of a win for Miami there. The Raiders, and then the Bills. So there is a chance that there is. So right now, if I had to give the inside track, the edge could actually go to Miami down the stretch to win the East. As for the LA Rams, they are getting into their gauntlet now 5-3. Rams are right now, I think they would be a 6 seed if the season were to would be a 6 or 7 seed if the season were to end today. But next week they get their bye week this week, then they play next week they play Seattle after the bye. Tampa, San Francisco, Arizona. They could easily lose all 4 of those games for playing the Patriots and Jets. So I'm kind of thinking the Rams could be one of those teams that could be finally hitting their correction. The Rams offense, Jared Goff is not an elite quarterback. Jared Goff is an average quarterback. I think LA is probably going to be closer to 8-8, 9-7 when the season ends. Whether or not I think the Rams are a playoff bubble team at this point. In what was one of the games of the week, Pittsburgh now 7-0 after beating the Baltimore Ravens. And the Pittsburgh defense made life miserable today for Lamar Jackson. Lamar threw 2 picks, hit 4 times. Pittsburgh was able to solve the Lamar Jackson puzzle. This was a very good game, and Juju had an excellent game as along with Ebron, and Big Ben did just enough to win the game. Pittsburgh now 7-0, and they play the cupcake Dallas Cowboys next week. Will the Steelers go undefeated? Maybe the rematch against Baltimore could be the game on Thanksgiving, could be where the Steelers could experience their first loss. Next 3 games are against cupcake opponents. The Cowboys, the Bengals, the Jaguars before playing Baltimore. At this point, Pittsburgh is going to win the AFC North. Baltimore will likely probably play either Buffalo or Miami in the first round as a 5 seed. I'm almost going to probably say that Baltimore is going to be entrenched as the 5 seed going into this year's playoffs. I am looking forward to seeing these two teams meet again on Thanksgiving. In the upset of the week, the Cincinnati Bengals upset the Tennessee Titans 31-20. Ryan Tannehill had one of his worst games of the year today at quarterback. And this was a hangover loss from losing to the Steelers last week. Joe Burrow 26 for 37, and yes, the Titans defense has problems. It might be time for Tennessee to start making a look to make some trades for defensive players before the trade deadline here. Derrick Henry had 100 rushing yards. That was probably the highlight for Tennessee today. But the Titans, the schedule's about to get tough. Next week they play Chicago, and Chicago is a team that is starting to fall back to earth. Then you've got the Colts. That's not going to be an easy game. Baltimore, not easy. Indianapolis again. So they're going to play Indianapolis 2 of the next 3 weeks starting November 12th before playing Cleveland and Jacksonville. We are going to find out a lot about Tennessee in those 2 games against the Colts. That could likely decide the AFC South. As for Cincinnati, they are a scrappy bunch. Maybe getting rid of Carlos Dunlap is what was needed for the Bengals, as Zach Taylor is trying to rebuild this Bengals team, and next year it'll be getting more defensive players for the Bengals. But Joe Burrow is the future in Cincinnati. I expect Cincinnati to probably be a spoiler, for Joe Burrow to be a spoiler as the Bengals look to play spoiler to other teams down the stretch. In Cleveland today, in what was probably one of the first snow games of the year, the Las Vegas Raiders beat the Cleveland Browns 16-6. Raiders IW a playoff team as of today. Yes, after today, I am putting the Raiders are going to be in the wild card this year at 4-3. Derek Carr wasn't great, but he was good enough. Josh Jacobs was able to run all over the Browns today, 128 rushing yards. Was able to pick up the slack for Carr, who didn't have the best of games. But Derek Carr, if you're going to use your feet, learn to slide. You got to learn to slide with your feet after you run the football. But this was probably one of the better defensive performances for the Raiders, as Baker Mayfield was pretty much shut down. 12 for 25, 122 rushing yards, and they were able to shut down Kareem Hunt. If the Raiders want to be more than a one-and-done team in the playoffs, they need to go out and trade for some defensive pieces before this year's deadline. But the Raiders' schedule, let's see, the Browns themselves, I don't think The Browns, at this point, Browns and Raiders. Raiders will probably be the 6, Browns will be the 7. The Raiders' schedule is easy. They get the Chargers, they get the Broncos, then they play Kansas City on Sunday night in 3 weeks before playing Atlanta. Then they get the Jets, the Colts, the Chargers, the Dolphins. There's a good opportunity to go 5-3 down that stretch and end up 9-7. It's gonna be 10-6. They might go 6-3 down the stretch, and the Raiders could easily finish 10-6 if all things go right for the Raiders. I think 9-7 is a lot more plausible because the Raiders tend to lose at Mile High Stadium. As for the Cleveland Browns, halfway into the schedule, next they get the Houston Texans. Win. Eagles. Win. Jaguars. Win. So now you're at 8-3 before you play the Titans. That might be a loss there. 8-4. Ravens. Giants. The Browns have a good chance. The Browns are probably going to go 9-7, 10-6. So I think the Raiders and Browns could each be at 9-7, 10-6 when the season is all said and done. But this was a matchup, and the Raiders, if all things go right, will be the 6 seed. The Browns will be the 7 seed in the wild card. In a game that was not close, the Kansas City Chiefs thoroughly beat up on the New York Jets, 35-9. This one was not close. The Browns did what they did. The Chiefs did what they did best, took care of business against bad teams. And the game was so bad, we saw Chad Henne come in. The Browns are halfway away from 0-16. Kansas City is halfway away from. It's going to be a battle for Kansas City and Pittsburgh in the final 8 games for that number 1 seed in the AFC. The downside is we don't see Pittsburgh and Kansas City play each other this year. That's the bad news. But we will find out probably but I don't think the 1 and 2 seeds could be decided until week 17 here, and it could be Pittsburgh and Kansas City going down to week 17 to decide who gets the 1 seed and who gets the 2 seed at this point. But Mahomes threw for over 400 yards today. In a game where the Colts sent a message that they are not going away anytime soon, Indianapolis beats Detroit 41-21. All of a sudden, the Colts-Raiders game in a few weeks is going to be very meaningful for wildcard seeding, potentially. Phillip Rivers was dominant today. This was one of Rivers' better games of the year. Stafford was good, but he took 5 sacks. That's bad. Detroit looking like what I think they're going to be, 7-9. Indianapolis, all of a sudden, they are tied with Tennessee for the South. And all of a sudden, that game in 2 weeks between Indianapolis and Tennessee is going to have a lot of implications as in terms of the South title. The bad news is they play Baltimore, they play Green Bay. Next 4 games are not going to be easy. December is a little more friendly as they get the Raiders, Texans. Well, the Steelers could be a blip. So there's potentially 5 losses there, which could put the Colts at 9-7 if all things go wrong. But if they can at least get a 10-6 and get a split with Tennessee, then the door to the playoffs gets a lot more wide open for the Colts at this point. In the upset, another big upset today, the Minnesota Vikings beat the Green Bay Packers 28-22. Kirk Cousins was able to carve up the Green Bay defense. And Aaron Rodgers just came up short on an upset on coming back against Minnesota. Aaron Rodgers can't do everything. The winner of the NFC North will likely be the 3 seed going into the playoffs. Green Bay needs to be active on acquiring defensive help at the trade deadline. Green Bay needs defensive help if they needs to trade for defense if they want to be more than just a divisional playoff hopeful at this point. Minnesota, they continue to fight under Mike Zimmer, despite the fact that Spielman keeps tearing this roster up, keeps tearing this team down to the bolts. I think Rick Spielman should lose his job. I think Zimmer should stay. In Denver today, in which was one of the games, it was just so Chargers that they would lose to the Denver Broncos. They were unable to shut down Philip Lindsay. And Drew Lock looked a lot better in this game, throwing for 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Herbert threw 2 costly picks, 3 touchdowns. But the Chargers, what's really sad about this game is that this would have been a good opportunity to get the Chargers to 3-4 and get Justin Herbert some confidence. But no, Gus Bradley's defense is terrible. I kind of think Gus Bradley is going to be gone when this season ends. Anthony Lynn is probably on the hot seat after today. But I think it will be Gus Bradley who loses his job in LA. They've got so much talent, but yet they should be better than 2-5. I really think the Chargers should be better than 2-5 at this point. And at this point, I think Gus Bradley has to be gone after the season in LA. Denver, give it to Vic Fangio. They don't. Some way, somehow, the Broncos are 3-4. I don't think the Broncos are a playoff team just yet, but they're starting to trend upward. And I think I think Fangio is earned the right to get another year in Denver. Despite all the injuries, the Broncos play tough. They didn't quit in this game after being down 24-3. That is on Fangio. Congratulations. In Chicago, the Saints beat the Bears 26-23 in a game where the Saints defense actually looked decent. They were able to sack Nick Foles 5 times in this game. And I think Allen Robinson probably wants his way out of Chicago at this point. David Montgomery almost rushed for 100 yards in this game. But Breeze maybe is showing that the fountain of youth in this game, 31 for 41. Chicago did all the right things, but Breeze was able to win with his arm. But Foles was not bad either. I'll give him that. This Nick Foles bounced back after having a stinker against the LA Rams. But now these are two teams that are going the opposite direction at this point. Saints trending upward at 5-2. But the next two games are against the Buccaneers, 49ers. But after that, it is an easy schedule. Falcons, Broncos, Falcons again, Eagles. Saints are going to be at least a wildcard team this year. Saints, IW, a playoff team this year. At worst, I think the Saints will probably finish at... The Saints could likely end up the 5 seed. Chicago starting to slip out of the playoff race at 5-3. As of today, if the season were to end today, the Bears would be out of the playoff race. At this point, the 5 would be the 5 would probably be the Cardinals. The 6 would be the Saints. The 7 would be the Rams. I think at some point the Rams will move into the 5. But for Chicago's fallen back to earth. The schedule could help Chicago down the stretch, but the lack of confidence in Nick Foles is what could set Chicago back here in the stretch. In Seattle, the 49ers get dominated by the Seattle Seahawks. And the 49ers just cannot catch a break when it comes to keeping players healthy. Jimmy Garoppolo re-aggravates his ankle sprain, and in comes Nick Mullins. Mullins actually looked pretty good. Looked more like the Nick Mullins we kind of know. The better Nick Mullins came in the fourth quarter. But Seattle's defense stepped up today. They were able to shut down JaMycal Hasty. Tevin Coleman was in, but then Coleman gets hurt, and that was a backbreaker. I think that was a backbreaker, losing Tevin Coleman again to injury. McKinnon has not been good this year. And then JaMycal, they might be down to having to bring up Austin Walter next week. And then they lose George Kittle to injury. We'll find out if Kittle will be back. But this is just... Honestly, Jimmy G is not going to be back next year for the Niners. I've kind of accepted the fate. He's not coming back. He can't stay healthy. 2 of his 3 years at the Niners, he's been hurt most of the time. That's not good. Jimmy G is becoming injury prone. And he is a frazzled quarterback. At this point, whether or not they make the playoffs might have to be secondary. It might come down to it might be time to hand the reins to Nick Mullins the final few games and evaluate Nick Mullins and see if he can be a bridge quarterback going into 2021. Jimmy G can be cut this offseason with very little cap penalty. As for Seattle, they got their swagger back in this game. And Seattle now leads the West at 6-1. They get Buffalo, LA, Arizona. Yeah, I think Seattle's going to win the division at probably 13-3, 12-4. They are simply a good team. And honestly, probably the next time the Niners and Seahawks meet again on the final game of the year, it's probably going to be for nothing. This year, sad but true. But for Seattle, I don't expect them to be done upgrading the defense in this year's trade deadline. But we'll see how Seattle clashes with Tampa Bay come playoff time. All right, this concludes it for NFL week, the recap for NFL Week 8. Everybody have a great week. We'll be back on Wednesday for the Week 9 preview.